And in between the last time we spoke, we talked about how in our last conversation, you were sharing with me from your heart, and my mind just went into another place. And we talked about how I just called that out. And in our conversation, I wanted to be so real and so authentic. And because I trust our relationship so much, I knew that I could share with you, Earl, my mind just went over there, and you would be able to have dialogue with me that would be really healing, powerful, authentic, and accepting.
Well, to me, that's what a holy relationship is a real relationship. And a real relationship isn't a relationship that's so fragile,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying, that it can't take it when our ego does come up, or that part of us that does drift off. That's why I try to say some stuff that's meaningful to me.
Uh-huh.
It's gonna wake me up. That way, no matter where the other person goes, that's fine. I'm still hearing something that I know is gonna reinforce the truth for me.
I'm gonna wake myself up, because that's really what it's about, right? I'm not here to wake you up. I'm here to wake myself up.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what I'm doing. It's like, okay, somebody says something to me, then I try to pause and then remember that what I say to them is what I'm asking for, what I'm reinforcing in my own mind.
Uh-huh.
So even if I don't have your attention, I've still benefited from the conversation or what I've said.
Uh-huh. So we're gonna be talking about fear in this conversation, and when you were speaking, it reminded me of, it took me back to a time when I was in college, and I was in this really special relationship. We'll talk about special relationships as we move forward. It was this really special relationship, and we go out to dinner, and he decides to sit and read the newspaper. And while we're at dinner, and I remember in the moment just feeling so unseen. He wasn't paying attention to me, Earl. He wasn't meeting my needs because he was reading the newspaper. And no matter how he tried to then share with me whatever he was reading from the newspaper, it just wasn't the way I wanted it. And I was not getting the attention that I wanted because I was relying on him to help me feel special, important, heard, seen. Have you ever had any experiences like that?
Oh, no, I've never had any experiences like that whatsoever, where I wanted to be special and somebody wasn't giving me the attention that I wanted. I don't know, maybe 1992. I think October 1st, 1992, that happened to me one time. That was the last time. It's like, I believe that there's only one underlying desire that everyone has, unless their desire is to wake up to their true spiritual identity. And I believe that the desire is to be special. I think that's the one idea that's driving the entire world. That
Uh-huh.
when you reduce it down, it's going to be whether I'm going to be special through power or through fame or through money or through, I'm special in terms of how much physical pleasure I give myself. I think that whole idea is behind the ambitions of most people, right?
Uh-huh.
So if I'm at the table and somebody's reading the newspaper, what's really upsetting me is that it's not really about me.
Right.
That's
True.
like, just like when you were saying it about the drifting off the conversation. Well, the conversation really wasn't about you.
Uh-huh.
It was like I'm just
keep bringing this stuff up.
yeah. And it works both ways. And so, believe me, anything that I say to anybody else is exactly what my own ego it does also. But I think that's the name of the game, is stalking my own ego, stalking that part of me that isn't present. And then why isn't it present? Well, it's not present because right now what I'm hearing has got to be something that's furthering some goal, purpose, specialness, or need that I have. And if someone's telling me about how to have more peace and how to have more connection, then in that moment, that must not be my goal. Really, because if it was really my goal, then at that moment, then I would see this opportunity for us to connect as what I would be riveted in.
Mm.
So if I'm not riveted, even though I'm saying that's the primary goal, there's a part of me that's afraid of that goal. And then I
Mm.
have to ask, what is that? What part of me is afraid to join? Because I'm
Mhm.
saying I want to join, but I'm tuning out. If I'm tuning out, then there's some part of me that doesn't want to join. So I need to take a look at my own fear of joining.
Mhm.
You know, in the Course in Miracles, it says that all fear is fear of loss.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I'll say that to myself. It's like, okay, you're afraid. What are you afraid of losing?
Mhm.
If
Right.
I really join with you.
Mhm. And we're going to be talking about fear to in this conversation, and that really is the root of everything, isn't it? That I'm either coming from a place where I'm extending love, or I'm calling for love, and that
Hmm.
call for love we call fear.
That's right.
And there's plenty of fear for us to talk about that seems to be going on outside of us right now. And so before we buy into any type of drama dream or call out any specific instance, I would love to just talk about where that fear comes from, and what that fear is about, and how I can let go of it. How can I release that fear so that I can stay in my higher consciousness mind, my higher Christ mind? So letting go of that fear. Where does it come from, and how do I release it?
And what have you come up with on
Well, I was hoping you were just going to give me the answer.
that? So you can drift off again. Oh no, I'm not
Yeah.
falling. I'm not falling for that again. You're gonna have to talk. Then you have to stay right here.
Yeah.
Right? You're gonna be
Well,
right
because
here with
that's what I want. I want you to just talk to me.
uh-huh.
I'm not going to let you read the newspaper. I'm not going to just let you read the reports.
Well,
Where?
it's funny because I can really relate to that because I've tried to make it a habit as much as I can when I'm with someone that I don't answer my cell phone or that I don't get on the cell phone and this is just absolutely necessary. And then I'll ask the person if it's okay if I take care of something that I've got to do right quick
Uh-huh.
because frankly, it does make you feel discounted and that you're
Mhm.
not really as validated as you think you like to be. But what that does for me is it makes me more determined to not make my peace dependent on what somebody else does or does not do, you know,
Right.
because that's going to get rid of a lot of my fear right there. What? My fear of loss of attention, my fear
Mhm.
of loss of specialness, uh, you know. And so if I'm giving myself that, then it's easier for me to be more forgiving and not make myself feel irritated about how somebody else is treating me.
Mhm.
Because fear to me is the same as I'm feeling separate from you, or I'm
Mhm.
feeling like I'm losing, or that I'm
Mhm.
vulnerable, or weak,
Mhm.
somehow or another, it's a threat.
Right.
Right. But the truth is, it's only a threat to that part of me that needs that attention.
Mhm.
See, that's the thing, is that I feel like all of my fear is really centered on this idea that I'm this separate body that could be threatened by any number of things that could be dangerous to me
Mhm.
as just this physical body. So I don't really believe you can get rid of fear for real until you start to know yourself as something beyond just your human identity. And that's what gets kind of deep. That's not discounting that human identity that I have. So i'm not I'm not denying that I have this Earl Purdy identity,
Mhm.
but if I think that that's all I am, it's going to be practically impossible for me to completely let go of fear,
Mhm.
because I'm going to be so tapped into how I can be hurt
Mhm.
emotionally, how I can be hurt physically. And I think as long as we don't get in touch with that deeper consciousness that we are beyond this, it's personally, I think it's impossible not to have any fear, or
Mhm.
unless I know I have a greater protection than what I can create for myself.
Mhm.
That's another thing. So I just a lot of times I don't know about you, but I feel like if people leave out the spiritual element, not the religious, because people hopelessly sometimes confuse religion with spirituality. And
Hmm.
so I have to always keep trying to make that distinction that, that your spirituality has to do with what you are, where
Hmm.
religion is more the way you choose to worship a
Hmm.
higher power. And
Hmm.
so and so that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about identity. I
Hmm.
think all problems, all fears are identity problems. It's a what am I, who am I
Hmm.
problem.
Right.
Hmm.
So you had asked me, what I had come up with, and I'm taken back to at a very young age. I experienced a situation. I believe I was 4 or 5 years old, and we had gone to some friends' homes, my parents' friend's home, and I had fallen asleep. And when I woke up, it's almost like it was the first time I can remember having experience where I realized where I was,
Hmm.
and I started crying. I remember the color of the sofa, the texture of the sofa. I remember all of this. And I remember just really crying, and my father coming and picking me up and asking me what was wrong. And I said, I want to go home. And he, we're going to go home soon. Don't worry. So I'm just clinging on to him because he has the answer. He's going to take me home.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then he takes me home and puts me to bed. And when I go when he puts me into bed, he said, see, we're home. And I didn't feel like I was home.
Mm.
And this was the beginning of a lifelong pursuit of trying to find my way home. Now, I didn't, at 4 or 5 years old, I'm not connecting all the dots, at least consciously. I don't remember connecting all those dots, but just this feeling of that I'm not home. What I love about Course in Miracles, though, is that I'm reminded, as in other ancient scriptures and spiritual texts, that home is not a place outside of me. It's my innate internal condition always. And it wasn't until I started studying Course in Miracles that I began to see that it was a condition, not a place.
Hmm.
So when I find myself getting fearful, it's because I believe that I have separated from home.
That's right.
That
Hmm.
and the opportunity at a very base level is to remember that my kingdom state has never ceased to exist. And I'm not just talking about that from platitudes, Earl. I'm talking about it from that I can really own
Yes.
that that my inheritance, because I was created in the eternal mind of God, that no matter how dim it might feel to me at times, I'm still home.
That's right.
Right?
Right.
So that's where I come from, and what fear is, how it tends to show up for me is I feel a certain sense of displacement first. It's my kind of first, in my mind, it's where I go. I don't feel like I'm at home. I don't feel safe. And you would then think, okay, well, let's just go home. Let's just decide that I'm going to choose again, and I'm going to remember that I'm in my kingdom state. But instead, what happens is I'll get on the ego treadmill, hamster wheel, and I'll just stir up some more dust or make the situation worse in some set. Not worse, but I'll stir up more chaos or whatever
Yeah.
it is. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So it should
Yeah.
be a simple route. I don't find myself always taking that simple path back home.
Hmm. Excuse me. There were a couple of things that came to my mind when I was also not being 100% present while you was talking and thinking about what I was going to say next.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Thank you for acknowledging you're the
as
newspaper.
as I can also say exactly what you were saying about that feeling about not being at home.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Number one is my fear comes from trusting in my own strength, separate from God.
Mm.
I try to remember that if I thought I was adequate to handle the situation, I wouldn't be afraid. So my fear is somehow rooted in a sense of inadequacy or
Mm.
being separate from my strength and
Mm-hmm.
separate from my power. But if I'm an awakening being, I'm getting in touch with the fact that my power is my connection to source, that my
Mm-hmm.
power is my connection to love, right? So if I'm feeling fear, it immediately now lets me know that I've gotten out of a love space. that I'm right now, I'm not in a love space, which means I'm not feeling safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had the experience when I was 5 or 6 years old of our house burning down. And I remember my mother grabbing me and my sister and running out of the house in order to save us, and the whole house burning down. And it was so traumatic as a kid to see your rocking horse go up in flames.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, but that feels really sad.
That's okay. That's all right. It was very sad. And and I was very much attached to my mother, and so we had to split the family up temporarily while the house was being repaired, right?
Oh my
and
gosh.
and so that was, and when you were talking, I remembered that feeling
Hmm.
of not being with my family.
Wow.
And it was so traumatic for me to not be with my family. And so that to me kind of gives me an idea of what it feels like to be here when I feel like I'm not connected to my true spiritual home. And what I mean
Right.
by that is the fear that I have is coming from being with strangers, as
Uh-huh.
opposed to being, see, family to me now means those who I have a connection with, communication with. We feel safe together, we feel connected in that sense, like you and I are family, right? But if you
Right.
were a total stranger to me, then I'm much more prone to have fear around
Mm.
you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's why there's so much fear now to me. It's because we're not looking at each other as the one family in this whole situation that we're in together.
Mm.
We're looking at each other from the standpoint that we're not, that we're strangers
Mm-hmm.
to each other, right? And
Wow.
so me feeling unafraid is in direct proportion to how much I feel like I know you.
Uh-huh.
So when I'm in a lot of fear, I realize it's because I think I'm among strangers or someone that I'm really not identifying with, or
Mm-hmm.
who I can relate to. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's also a couple of more ways that fear happens. Number one, I'm trusting in my own strength, separate from God. Number two, I feel like I'm surrounded by strangers and that I'm not at home
Right.
with my family. And
Mm-hmm.
that, so that also is like, since we're talking about fear.
Right. I wanted to ask you a question because in Course in Miracles, it talks about this aspect of our desire to be autonomous.
Hmm.
So on the one hand, I want you to pay attention to me and I want you to be very connected to all of my needs and meeting all my needs.
Hmm.
At the same time, I want to be autonomous. But then it goes on to talk about that we can connect into the autonomy of God, which is a capital A,
Right.
autonomy. Are you familiar with that
Yeah.
section of the course? I
Yeah.
knew you would be.
Yeah.
So maybe you can help me. Can you help me kind of unpack that a little bit?
Well, I feel like the autonomy that I'm taught is the autonomy of me thinking that I'm on my own. That part of being an adult is how successful I am at doing everything without needing anybody else's help or support. You
Uh-huh.
know, and so therefore I'm on my own,
Mm-hmm.
separate from everybody else, separate from all that is, which is another word I have for God, right? So if I think I'm on my own, then an autonomous, of course, that's the definition of an adult to a certain degree, but it's also a very frightening way to feel. That's why there's so much competition
Mm-hmm.
instead of cooperation, as everybody's going, each man out for himself. And because I think I'm on my own and I got to make it. When I hear autonomy from a God perspective, it's just I'm a part of this one self
Mm.
that's creating
Ah,
everything.
yes.
So that's, to me, that's the big A, autonomy, because there, in that sense, it is just one,
Right.
right? But it's the one that's everything.
Right.
Where with me, it's just the one, but I'm separate from everything. So
Okay.
so that would be what I would call the ego or the fearful level of
Mm-hmm.
autonomy and self-sufficiency. Does that make
I
any
had
sense?
asked you how we can get rid of fear so that we can live in peace and connection. And then you started to say something about that. Do you remember, or maybe it doesn't matter what you were going to say, how can we talk about that right now?
Well, if I want that, well, that was, to me, that loops back to what I was saying about if you're not a stranger to me and I see you as one with me or connected to me,
Mm.
or we got the same purpose
Mm-hmm.
and we're working toward that purpose together, then
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel alone and I feel supported. And the less alone I feel, the less fear I feel.
Right.
If I feel totally safe with you, if I believe that you are not someone that's going to attack me, that
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to attack you or judge you or condemn you, I'm going to feel safe with you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the amount of peace and safety I feel is also based on, and fearlessness I feel is directly related to how how I'm not feeling threatened and how much I'm feeling supported, and that we're both wanting that peace and love for each other. So to me, it all comes back to communication
Mm-hmm.
ultimately. If I
Right.
know you and we're communicating and we're on the same page or got the same goal, my fear is going to decrease. If I
Mm-hmm.
have some idea of who you are, what you want, what your purpose is, then I feel like I know you in a way. I may not know the details of how you're going to work out the purpose of peace,
Right.
but if you tell me you really want peace and you really want to be in a loving experience and environment and you want to bring love and peace to the world, that I'm going to feel more safe around you
Mm-hmm.
immediately, right?
Right.
And so that seems to be, for me, the biggest thing is to have some idea of what does this person want, what's their
Mm-hmm.
value system, what do they see as being important as far as in personal relationships,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
Amazing. Well, we covered a lot, and
Yep.
we usually do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Earl,
Oh,
for helping me unpack that.
well, it works both ways.
Yeah.
I'm learning from what's coming through you and me because we are one. We are not strangers.
Yes, we're not
Yeah,
strangers, and
yeah,
we're part of the big autonomy.
exactly.
We're not autonomous. Amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.